In The Sopranos, the police are not written like clean opposites to the mob. They are not there to make the world feel fair. They are not there to make Tony look like the villain while they stand on the other side as pure justice. Most of the time, they are tired, practical, compromised, bitter, ambitious, or just trying to do their jobs inside a system that is much slower than the criminals they are chasing. That is what makes the law enforcement side of the show interesting. The mob has its own rules, its own lies, and its own excuses. But the police and FBI have their own version of that too. They talk about justice, but they still use pressure. They talk about saving people, but they still burn informants. They talk about taking down Tony Soprano, but half the time, Tony is still eating lunch at Satriali's while their case moves forward 1 inch at a time. So ranking who the realest police are in The Sopranos is not only about who is the most honest, it is about who actually understands the world they are standing in. Because some of them understand Tony perfectly. Some of them think they understand him, but only see him as a file. Some of them wear the badge, but are closer to criminals than cops. And some of them, for one small moment, show more backbone than almost anyone else in the series. At the top, the realest lawman in the entire show might be Officer Leon Wilmore. That sounds strange at first because he is not one of the major characters. He is not leading the Soprano case. He is not wiretapping houses, flipping informants, or building a federal indictment. He is just the officer who pulls Tony over for speeding and treats him like an ordinary man. But that is exactly why he matters. Tony is used to the world bending around him. In North Jersey, he has money, fear, political favors, union connections, and enough reputation that people usually understand what kind of man they are dealing with before he has to explain it. When he gets stopped, he tries to handle it the way he handles everything else. He leans on attitude. He hints at who he knows. He expects the officer to understand that this is not a normal traffic stop. Wilmore does not care. He does not perform toughness. He does not act impressed. He does not get excited because he has Tony Soprano in front of him. He just does the job. And because the show is honest about power, doing the job costs him. Tony cannot handle being treated like a regular citizen, so he uses his connection to Zellman to punish him. Later, Tony sees Wilmore working another job, and the moment tells you everything. A man did the right thing, and the system did not protect him. That is why Wilmore is the realist. He has no big speech, no special task force, no personal obsession with organized crime. He simply refuses to be moved by Tony's presence. In a show full of people who fold, flatter, calculate, or look away, that is rare. Second is Agent Dwight Harris, but his place is more complicated. Harris starts as one of the main federal agents watching Tony. Early on, he is part of that outside pressure around the Soprano family. He is not friendly with Tony, but he is not cartoonishly hostile either. He watches him, studies him, and tries to understand the shape of the organization. He knows Tony is dangerous, but he also knows that Tony is not just a monster in a file. Tony is a person with habits, fears, loyalties, moods, and weaknesses. That is what makes Harris different from the other agents. He has the distance of law enforcement, but he also has enough street sense to understand that criminals are not always beaten from above. Sometimes they are understood from the side. After 9/11, Harris changes. His focus shifts toward terrorism, and the old mob case starts to feel smaller compared to the new world he is working in. This is where his relationship with Tony becomes strange. He is still law enforcement, but the old hard line begins to soften. He talks to Tony differently. He asks for information differently. By the end, when the war between New Jersey and New York becomes serious, Harris crosses into something that feels almost personal. He is not corrupt in the same way Vin Makazian is corrupt. He is not on Tony's payroll. He is not doing mob errands. But he does become emotionally involved in a way an agent probably should not. He wants Phil Leotardo gone. He sees Tony as the lesser evil. He has spent so long around the case that the boundaries begin to blur. That is what makes Harris real, but not clean. He understands the game better than almost anyone on the law side. He knows that Tony is guilty. He knows the mob destroys lives. But he also understands that the criminal world is not made of equal pieces. Some threats feel more immediate than others. Some criminals are useful. Some relationships become too familiar. Harris is real because he knows how the world works, but he is also proof that knowing too much can pull you closer to the people you are supposed to be hunting. Third is Robin Sanseverino. Sanseverino is one of the most professional agents in the show, and that is both her strength and her ugliness. She is not stupid. She is not emotional in the way some of the others become. When she handles Adriana, she understands pressure. She understands fear. She knows how to keep an informant close enough to be useful, but not close enough to be treated like family. With Adriana, the FBI side of The Sopranos becomes much harder to look at. Adriana is not innocent in a legal sense, but she is not built for that world. She is not a hardened gangster. She is not a strategist. She is a scared woman trapped between the man she loves and a federal case that keeps tightening around her. Sanseverino sees that, but seeing it does not stop her. That is the cold part. Sanseverino knows Adriana is breaking down. She knows the danger is real. She knows that once Adriana tells Christopher, anything can happen. But the machine keeps moving because the case matters more than the person inside it. In that sense, Sanseverino is real police in the institutional way. She is patient, sharp, and focused. She does not pretend to be Adriana's friend the way Deborah Cicerone does. She does not need to seduce anyone into trust. She just applies pressure until something gives. But that is also why she cannot be number one. She is real as an agent, but not always real as a human being. She understands the case better than she understands the cost. Her work is effective, but there is something deadening about it. Adriana's fear becomes evidence. Her panic becomes leverage. Her life becomes a route toward Tony. Sanseverino is good at the job, but the job itself starts to look brutal when it is done well. Fourth is Skip Lipari. Skip is the agent who handles Big Pussy, and his scenes show one of the strangest parts of informant work. The handler has to keep the informant talking, but also has to keep reminding him that this is not friendship. Pussy wants to feel like there is some relationship there. He wants to believe Skip understands him. He wants someone to listen to him because by that point he cannot fully belong to Tony's world anymore, and he cannot fully belong to the government's world either. Skip knows this, and he tries to keep the line clear. That is what makes him more honest than some of the others. He does not really sell Pussy a fantasy. He reminds him that he is a cooperating witness, not a partner. But the truth is, even that line becomes messy, because informant work depends on emotional confusion. It depends on fear, guilt, dependence, and the hope that cooperation will somehow become salvation. Skip is not cruel in the obvious way. He is not a bad agent, but he is also not fully in control of what Pussy's cooperation is doing to him. Pussy becomes more paranoid, more isolated, and more desperate. He starts talking like a man trying to convince himself that this second life has meaning. Skip can manage the information, but he cannot save the man giving it to him. That puts Skip in the middle of the ranking. He is real enough to know the relationship is fake, but not real enough to understand how much damage that fake relationship creates. Fifth is Frank Cubitoso. Cubitoso is the federal supervisor, the man looking at the Soprano case from a higher level. He is not out there emotionally bonding with informants the way Harris sometimes does, and he is not the face Adriana trusts or fears most directly. He is more like the mind of the operation: surveillance, strategy, pressure, timing. He sees Tony less as a person and more as the center of a structure that needs to be cracked. That makes him effective. He is part of the long federal patience around Tony. The FBI in The Sopranos does not move like the mob. Tony can make a decision in a restaurant, send someone to threaten a man, and have the result by the next day. The FBI moves through warrants, bugs, flipped witnesses, recordings, meetings, failed operations, and cases that take years to build. Cubitoso represents that slow pressure. But the problem with him is that he often feels too comfortable with the machine. When things go wrong, the machine simply resets. An informant dies, disappears, panics, or becomes useless, and the case continues. Cubitoso is not unaware, but he has the emotional distance of someone who has been doing this too long. He wants Tony, and because he wants Tony, people underneath Tony become tools. That is why he is real, but not the realist. He understands federal work. He understands organized crime. But he does not always seem to feel the human weight of the methods being used. Sixth is Deborah Cicerone. Deborah is one of the most effective agents in terms of pure deception. Going undercover as Danielle, she gets close to Adriana in a way the FBI never could have done openly. She enters Adriana's life through normal conversation, shopping, friendship, and the kind of casual female closeness Adriana is hungry for. Adriana does not have many safe people around her. Her world is full of men who lie, cheat, explode, and disappear into mob business. So when Danielle appears, Adriana lets her in. That is what makes the undercover work so ugly. Deborah does the job well, but the job requires her to create a fake emotional bond with a woman who is already vulnerable. She is not just gathering information. She is building trust in order to weaponize it later. And once the mask comes off, Adriana is left with one more betrayal in a life already full of them. As police, Deborah is skilled. As a person in the story, she is hard to respect. Not because undercover work is automatically wrong, but because with Adriana, the target never feels like a real criminal mastermind. It feels like the FBI found the softest person near Tony and squeezed until blood came out. Deborah is real in the tactical sense. She can act, she can manipulate, she can get inside. But she is not real in the deeper sense because she never seems to fully own what her success does to Adriana. Seventh is Frank Grasso and the other smaller FBI agents around the case. Grasso matters mostly because of what he represents. He is one of the agents in the federal world surrounding Tony, and Tony immediately reads him through identity and resentment. To Tony, an Italian-American FBI agent going after Italian-American mobsters feels like a betrayal Of course, Tony's logic is self-serving. He wants ethnicity to protect him from accountability. He wants the idea of shared background to matter more than the crimes themselves. But the tension is important. The Sopranos often shows Italian-American identity being used as a shield. Tony complains about stereotypes when it benefits him, while actively living in the world that feeds those stereotypes. Characters like Grasso expose that contradiction. He is on the side of the law, and Tony hates him partly because he cannot control him with the usual cultural pressure. Still, Grasso is not developed enough to rank higher. He is part of the system, not one of its most revealing faces. He shows us how Tony sees law enforcement, but he does not show us much of himself. Ron Goddard falls into a similar place. He is connected to Harris's post-9/11 terrorism work, and his presence shows how the government's priorities have shifted. The mob is still there, still dangerous, still profitable, but the world outside New Jersey has changed. The FBI is no longer only looking at Tony's crew as the main threat. They are looking at ports, money, international connections, and possible terrorism links. Goddard helps show that bigger picture, but as a character, he is more function than personality, so the smaller agents sit lower in the ranking. They are real enough as pieces of the law enforcement world, but they are not where the show does its strongest work. 8th is Vin Makazian. Vin might be the saddest law enforcement figure in the show. He is a detective, but he is also on Tony's payroll. He feeds Tony information. He does personal work for him. He abuses his authority. He is bitter, damaged, and already half destroyed by the time we meet him. There is nothing clean about him. He is exactly the kind of cop who proves the badge can become another hustle if the man wearing it is broken enough. But Vin is not fake. That is the strange thing about him. He is corrupt, but he sees things clearly. He understands Tony better than most people outside the mob. He knows how ugly these people are. He knows how dirty the world is. He knows he is part of it. He does not have the polished professionalism of the FBI agents, and he does not have Wilmore's moral backbone. What he has is a kind of ruined honesty. Vin knows he is trashing himself. His scenes carry a heavy feeling because he does not seem like a man enjoying corruption. He seems like a man who has already accepted that he is too far down to climb back up. When he tells Tony that Big Pussy may be an informant, he is technically giving useful information, but even that is tangled up in his own debts and resentment. You never fully know where truth ends and self-interest begins with him. That is why Vin ranks low as police, but high as a character. He is real in the sense that he feels painfully believable. A tired detective, underpaid, emotionally wrecked, morally gone, selling pieces of his badge to a mob boss because the line between law and crime has already disappeared for him. But if the question is, who is the realest police, he cannot be near the top. He understands the street, but he has surrendered to it. And then at the very bottom is Barry Haydu. Haydu is the least real police because whatever he once was, the badge means almost nothing by the time his name enters the story. He is a retired detective tied to the story of Dickie Moltisanti's murder, and Tony gives him to Christopher as a target. Whether Tony is telling the full truth or using the story for his own purpose, Haydu represents the darkest version of law enforcement in the show, a cop who may have used his position while living like a criminal underneath it. He is not like Vin, where corruption feels pathetic and human. Haydu feels colder. He is the idea of the badge emptied out completely. A police officer is supposed to represent order, but Haydu is connected to murder, gambling, debt, and the same underworld the police are supposed to fight. By the time Christopher reaches him, he is not really a lawman anymore. He is just another old piece of violence waiting to be collected. That is why he is last. Not because he is the least important, but because he is the clearest example of what happens when the badge becomes camouflage. Vin is a fallen cop. Haydu feels like a criminal who happened to have been a cop. So the ranking looks like this. Leon Wilmore is the realist, because he does the job when it matters, even against Tony Soprano, and pays for it. Dwight Harris is second because he understands the criminal world better than almost anyone on the law side, even if that understanding pulls him too close. Robin Sanseverino is third because she is professional, focused, and effective, but too cold in the way she handles human damage. Skip Lipari is fourth because he knows informant work is not friendship, even if he cannot stop the emotional wreckage it creates. Frank Cubitoso is fifth because he represents the long federal machine, smart, patient, and useful, but distant from the people crushed under the case. Deborah Cicerone is sixth because she is tactically good but morally uncomfortable, especially in how she enters Adriana's life. Frank Grasso, Ron Goddard, and the smaller agents come next because they help build the law enforcement world but do not carry the same weight as characters. Vin Makazian is near the bottom because he understands everything but has sold too much of himself to still count as real police. Barry Haydu is last because he represents the badge at its most rotten. The funny thing is that The Sopranos does not make the police useless. The FBI is often right. Tony is guilty. His crew does murder people. They do corrupt businesses, ruin families, exploit addicts, threaten civilians, and hide behind tradition whenever it benefits them. The law is not wrong for chasing him, but the show is honest about the law too. The FBI can be right and still be cruel. A cop can wear a badge and still be bought. An agent can chase criminals for years and slowly start to think like the world he is studying. A good officer can do the right thing and still get punished because the system around him is weaker than the influence of a man like Tony. That is the point. In The Sopranos, being on the side of the law does not automatically make someone real. The realest ones are the people who understand what they are standing against without becoming it completely. Leon Wilmore does that in one traffic stop. Harris almost does it, then gets pulled too close. Sansino does the work, but loses sight of the person under the pressure. Vin understands the street, but the street already owns him. And Haydu is what happens when there is no line left at all. That is why the law enforcement side of The Sopranos works so well. It is not a clean wall between cops and criminals. It is a cracked mirror. On one side, Tony and his crew pretend they have honor. On the other side, the police and FBI pretend the system is cleaner than it is. Somewhere between them, you get the truth. The mob is rotten. The law is necessary. And the realest police are the ones who can face Tony Soprano without needing to become another version of him.